A little boy asked a little girl as they played.
Will you be my fiancé?
Of course.
The little girl beams, giving the little boy a peck on the cheek. Present. In the elegant era of Victorian England, where every step in a ballroom was a delicate dance of grace and decorum, a young woman named Lady Amelia stood out. Her beauty was renowned, but behind her demure smile lay a heart yearning for more than society's constraints. To do something meaningful of her choosing, but her father already had other plans for her. He was already arranging a marriage between her and his old friend Lord Brian, who was a well-known nasty rake amongst society. That, however, was no matter to Amelia's father. He was Lord Dion, a baron obsessed with status and in search of respect that high society just wouldn't give him. Plus, Lord Brian was the Earl of Domania, which has vast lands and plentiful harvests. And the best part is, Lord Brian requested his daughter and even waived her dowry if he kept away any and every other suitor, which was perfect because he had already lost the dowry betting on horses and was struggling to get it back, along with the debt he owed Lord Brian. Amelia was walking down the hall when she heard some maids whispering.
I can't believe Lady Amelia is getting engaged tonight.
One blonde-haired maid said, smiling.
Enter an earl at that.
Another maid with black hair beamed.
Maybe she'll take one of us with her when she leaves. The maids at Lord Brian won't know her like we do.
Amelia's heart sank when she heard Lord Brian's name. No, she whispered. She had only been introduced into society a few weeks prior, but she already knew the reputation that came with Lord Brian. She didn't want this, but she hasn't had any other suitor since she debuted. And if the maids are already talking about it, then her father surely already knows. She turned and headed to her father's study. Father, what is the meaning of this? How can I be a fiancé of a man who has only seen me in passing? Not to mention that he is completely distasteful with his rendezvous around society, Amelia exclaimed, upset.
Hush, child. You will be the perfect wife for Lord Brian. He is even taking you without a dowry,
her father said, not looking up from his desk. But father, surely there will be others. Wouldn't it be wise to wait? Amelia starts to plead her case, but her father cuts her off.
The only thing wise would be for you to get out of my study and get ready for the ball tonight.
Lord Brian wants you and he shall have you. End of discussion,
her father said coldly. Amelia looks at him in shock, with tears welling up in her eyes. Her father has never spoken to her this way before. She starts to make her way out defeated.
It was about time for you to start to fulfill your duties. Do well not to embarrass this family, Amelia.
That was the last thing her father said to her as she walked out, closing the door behind her. Maids start to get her dressed once she enters her room, as they chatted away, giving her compliments.
You look amazing. You are beautiful.
You look so great.
She disassociates, mourning her soon-to-be old life and dreams and dreading her new one. She was lost in thought for some time. Before she knew it, the carriage was coming to a stop in front of a beautiful mansion. She sees other lords and ladies entering the ball. Amelia, her father and mother, all make their way into the home. The host of the ball was the Marquis of Damline, but the reasoning for the ball alludes to her as her mind is now elsewhere. She greets the Marquis and Marchioness and slips away to the refreshments for a drink to calm her nerves. His fiancée, Amelia thought to herself. She shakes her head. Maybe it was for the best. Her eyes could be the reason she had no other suitors. She was a gorgeous girl with color eyes added to her appeal. Something different that made her stand out. Her father even told her that she looked like a treasure chest full of jewels, but it seems the lords don't see it the same way. Maybe Lord Brian would actually change his ways for her, and they could be a family. He wasn't terrible to look at, and he was an earl that requested her. It could work out, she thought. She paced around the lavish ball, waiting to meet with Lord Brian, so they could talk before the proposal. She smiled to herself. Maybe they just need to speak together privately to nurse some sparks between them. She caught a glimpse of him when she arrived, but that was it, and he was nowhere to be found. She secluded herself to the wall so that Lord Brian would have her first dance. Time seemed to fly by amidst the flickering candlelight and swirling skirts, and Lady Amelia's eyes landed on a mysterious stranger. His presence was enigmatic, his gaze intense yet respectful. She never saw this man before. He was very handsome with golden eyes. She would have remembered a lord's son that looked like him. He must be someone's family member visiting from the countryside. As she took his presence in, she saw that he was staring back at her. Their eyes seemed to lock in with each other with intensity. Amelia quickly looked away, breaking the trance they were in. "I mustn't be rude. I am to be a fiancé," she thought to herself. She walks towards a balcony for some fresh air. She looks at the moon, wondering if this is the start to her happy life. She turns around when she hears footsteps approaching. It was the handsome man with golden eyes from earlier.
"Can I join you?"
he asked. She shook her head yes to her own surprise. It was scandalous to be alone with a man who wasn't your husband or betrothed.
"Not enjoying the festivities?"
he asked. "No, not really," she sighed. "Honestly, I don't even know what this ball is for. Not that it matters. It's probably some narcissist reason anyway," Amelia said bluntly.
"Yeah, my cousin is definitely a selfish bastard for making it home from the war,"
the Lord said seriously. Amelia gasps, embarrassed. "I apologize, my lord," she says quickly.
"No need. Personally, I think he came home too early. Plus, I like someone who doesn't hold their tongue,"
he said as he smiled. "Really, my mother says I'm perfect until I part my lips," she chuckled.
"I think that is what adds to your charm, that and those beautiful eyes. They're so captivating, like a mine of crystals,"
he said to her. Amelia blushed. She never had such a straightforward compliment about her eyes, besides from her father. "Your eyes are very lovely, too. They remind me of shooting stars," she said to him.
"I've never heard that one before,"
he says. "Neither have I heard of mines of crystal. But that doesn't mean it is not true," she retorts back.
"I have no quarrel with that,"
he said. They laugh and banter for a few more minutes, until the Lord asked,
"Why does your heart feel so distant when you laugh?"
"What do you mean?" she asked.
"It's like when you're smiling. When you truly smile, it reaches your eyes. But with your eyes, they almost feel stress, like they're constantly looking for answers not yet asked."
At that moment, Amelia felt as though she was completely naked. His eyes seemed to pierce straight through the mask she had prepared for society. She uttered, taken aback. "Everything is always carefully planned out for me, regardless of my input. I think it's better to push back my wants and be grateful for what I have," she said forlornly as she thought back to the discussion with her father early. The Lord slightly touches her hand.
"It must be suffering to never be able to act on one's own desire,"
he said with concern in his voice. Amelia nods her head and glances back at the moon.
"You ever wonder what would happen if you did?"
he asked. "Did what?" Amelia said as she turned to meet his gaze. His eyes had a calm feeling about them, mixed with intensity and earnestness. He stepped closer.
"If you act on your desires,"
he said, staring at her. She stood there captivated, wishing this was a reality she could engage with, one that she could claim for her own. But she has already made up her mind. Lord Brian will make a fine husband. She didn't even know who this lord was. He was getting dangerously close to her. She finally snapped away from the hold of his eyes. "Thank you, my lord, for the wonderful conversation. I must be getting back now. Enjoyed the rest of the ball," she said as she hurried away. "Wait your name," the Lord called after her. But she was already gone out of the ballroom and into the halls. I am to be a fiancé. I am to be a fiancé, she kept repeating to herself. She looked for the nearest room to reset herself and get ready for her proposal. She was already a ways away from the ballroom, so she went into the nearest room she could find. She walked in only to see that it was already taken by a couple.
Can't you see this room is occupied?
The lord said, shielding the girl whose clothes were disheveled. Apologies, my lord. Amelia turns to leave. I did not know anyone was in here. She stops herself for the man's voice. Sounds awfully familiar. She turns back around to see that the voice belongs to Lord Brian. And he's not just with any woman. He was with the Marquis's youngest daughter, who was already betrothed to a wealthy merchant's sons.
You still haven't left? Do I have to remove you myself?
Lord Brian yells as he turns to face her. He meets her eyes, and for a sec, there was a hint of fear in them, but that quickly turned into strong arm bravado.
You may leave. This is not a matter that concerns you,
he states coldly. Amelia's feet were basically one with the floor at the moment. There was no way she could move.
You hear me? Get out,
he yelled. How dare you yell at me when you're in this position? She cried out to her own amazed. Weren't I to be your fiancé? She speaks as venom starts to seep out. I thought you would change your way from being a disgusting rake, that this proposal could be a gesture of love. I see I have been a fool, she spits out. She turns to leave, but Lord Brian stops her by grabbing her arm tightly.
You are to be my fiancé. You are to bear my heir, because I will it. Who I take for my pleasure is no concern of yours.
He spits back and pushes her against the door. I will refuse the proposal. She weeps. That got her a slap.
This proposal is only a formality. You were my fiancé the moment I requested it. Not even your father can take back what is now mine. I have been waiting so long for you to belong to me,
he whispers in her ear.
Plus, no one else will take you. Society thinks your eyes will bring famine. You really should be thanking me,
he says. Amelia's stomach dropped when she heard the mention of her eyes. Was that really the reason she had no other suitors? She shook it off. At the end of it all, this man was a pig, and she wanted nothing to do with him. You are revolting, she said.
Your tune will soon change,
he states it as a promise. Amelia scurried out of the room, tears escaping against her wishes. She gathers herself and enters the ballroom. Upon entering, her arm was grabbed again, but this time by her father.
Where have you been, girl? Your proposal is bound to happen soon. I told you not to embarrass me. Who knows when Lord Brian will show up?
He said in a low tone. I can't marry him, father. I caught him with another woman, she cried with her head down.
You can. You will be the mistress of the house. There is no need to worry about the extra things your husband will do,
he said. But father, she pleads.
Enough. Be ready, and you better look the part of a happy fiancé,
he said angrily, as he walks away to get a drink. Defeated, her anxiety starts to kick in. She starts to imagine her life with that disgusting man, and then true fear overcomes her. The threats he made, hitting her behind closed doors, even if there was a witness. She then realized that hell awaits her after today. Her body starts to feel panic as everything starts to sink in. She didn't want this, but her options were scarce. The only ways to stop a proposal was for the king to void it, or for one to ruin themselves. The king wouldn't hear the words of a baron's daughters, nor could ruined herself. Her marriage prospects would vanish. Wait, she had no other marriage prospects, she thought to herself. Lord Brian was the only one. She wouldn't be losing much if she did. Maybe she would be isolated from society and sent to the countryside. She could have her own air to breathe there. Yes, she smiled to herself. Just then someone tapped her shoulder. She looked up, and it was the Lord from early.
It seems like you're enjoying the ball now,
he said. In some sorts, Amelia said, caught off guard.
Are you enjoying it enough to dance with me?
He asked. Amelia looked at him puzzled, unsure how to answer, but with people's stares falling on them, she quickly said yes. They took to the dance floor and began to dance. He was a very good dancer, holding her firmly yet gently as they glide on the dance floor. His allure was mesmerizing, and his touch was comforting. His eyes met hers and held her captive almost breathlessly.
"There's the real you,"
he said as he held her close to his chest. She was about to say something when Lord Brian catches her sight. His demeanor was hostile, and he mouthed something that she could only assume was a threat. Panic starts to overcome her again. Once this song ends, so does the little bit of freedom she has left. She looks back at the Lord, who now stares at her with concern. He has basically been carrying her through the entire dance, holding her steady as she starts to panic. He looks to where her eyes once were, and sees the hostile Lord Brian. He turns back to Amelia. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Amelia was stunned by this question, but quickly snapped out of it as she sees Lord Brian start to make his way towards them as the song starts to end, with Lord Brian's footstep coming near. She stares into the Lord's eye and says the first words that came to mind. "Kiss me," she uttered quickly. The Lord did not hesitate. He and Amelia kiss in the middle of the ballroom, the guests face utter bewilderment as the scene unfolded. Amelia's heart was filled with warmth from the kiss that she could only describe as zealous. That feeling, however, was interrupted. "Harlot," Lord Brian yelled. "How dare you disgrace your fiancé?" he said while grabbing her arm, trying to pull her away from the Lord. Amelia snatches her arm away from him.
Do not touch me. I do not belong to you.
Amelia spat.
"You thought this act of yours would get you off the hook. No matter who you decide to throw yourself at, I won't let you go."
He tried to grab her again, but this time the Lord blocked him.
"This doesn't concern you,"
Lord Brian snaps.
"Her father gave her to me to repay his debts to me,"
he said smugly. There were gasps around the ballroom. Amelia turns to see her father looking embarrassed by the conversation. Her mother's head is down in shame. "Is he telling the truth? Father, did you sell me? Is that why there were no other prospects? Because I was already sold?" Amelia asked frantically. Her father shook his head. "Yes, but he can explain himself." Lord Brian interjects.
"Her father owes me $6.5 million,
he said to the Lord.
"Unless you can pay what is owed to me, then I suggest that you leave me to collect my collateral as I see fit."
He goes to grab Amelia again, but the Lord moves her away from him.
"She is not your collateral, she's my fiancée,"
the Lord exclaimed. Amelia looks to the Lord in shock, and so is everyone in the ball. The music has long since stopped, and the Lord, Amelia, and Lord Brian have taken center stage.
"And what makes you think that you have the authority to proclaim that?"
Lord Brian grunts.
"She's been my fiancée for a very long time now,"
the Lord said.
"Are you so overzealous from a kiss that you think that you can pay $6.5 million out of thin air?"
Lord Brian shouted. Everyone starts to murmur. That was a heavy price to pay for women's debt. Amelia starts to get nervous. She might have jumped the gun. Her treatment by Lord Brian will be much worse once he gets a hold of her.
"I can have the paperwork for the money ready for you by the morning,"
Lord states. Lord Brian scoffed.
"You expect me to believe that you have such money on hand? Do you even have a household name, because I don't ever remember ever seeing you here before?"
Lord Brian sneers.
"I am the Duke of Archball,"
the Lord proclaimed. This made Lord Brian laugh.
"A duke," he says. "The kingdom of echoes doesn't have a dukedom. He is a swindler."
His eyes glazes at Amelia.
"This is the man you threw yourself at."
Lord Brian laughs.
"Humble yourself, maybe. If you beg for my forgiveness, I'd consider taking you as a concubine. Now that I see that you have soiled yourself with lowlives, there's no telling how fresh this crop is,"
Lord Brian said in disdain. Amelia was about to say something, but she was interrupted by the Lord.
"You are right. There has never been a dukedom in the Echo's kingdom before. That is before I, the second son of the king, inherited the title,"
the Lord says. Confusion among the crowd commenced. People had heard that the king had a son with a mistress, but no one had seen them in 20 years since the queen sent them away. Some 11 assumed that she killed them.
I am King Arley's son, Lord Kai Arley,
he announced across the room. The room fell silent. Then it quickly turned into astonishment. Everyone starts to run towards Lord Kai Arley. There were questions thrown from left to right. Lord Brian stressed. Could this man was really the king's son? He had to be making a claim like that to mean he is in line for the throne. It would be treason if he lied about that. Which means, if he wanted to take Amelia, he would have no power to stop him. He couldn't let that happen. He was obsessed with her, and her eyes, needed an heir from her.
No,
Lord Brian bellowed.
Even if you are the son of the king, I won't give her up as my fiancée. I refuse other payments. I want her. That sounds like slavery, which I'm pretty sure it's very illegal. But let's take it up with the king and see his take on the matter.
Lord Arley said.
Until then, Amelia is my fiancée if she'll have me.
He looks towards Amelia. Amelia looks at him, shocked at his proclamation. She couldn't believe it. How could he have been a duke this entire time? And he wanted her, Baron's daughter. She couldn't help herself but doubt that this was real.
Amelia, it is your choice to make. If you stay with me, if you reject me, the choice is up to you.
Amelia finds herself staring into his golden eyes again. She can feel the warmth from it. They felt familiar. And suddenly, a memory of a little boy from the countryside with golden eyes appeared in her head. She did know this man, and at that moment she knew he was not toying with her. He meant everything that he said, and he does not lie, because he already told her this a very long time ago. Yes, I will be your fiancé, she says. Lord Byron stares at her angrily. He was about to say something, but realized the show he started was not panning out in his favor. He glares and curses at them and then storms out of the ballroom. Amelia looked at her father, who stared at her astonishment. He walked over to praise her.
I always knew that you were a treasure full of jewels,
he says as he tries to go in for a hug. But Amelia steps back a little, not sure how to take him. There is a lot that we have to discuss. I think it's best for us to take a step back and finish discussing this at home, she said to him. There's a flash of annoyance in her father's eyes, but it's quickly gone.
As you wish, Duchess,
he says slyly. He nods to the Duke as he takes her mother's arm and walks away. Amelia now turns to Lord Arley. So, a duke, she says to him.
It wasn't officially proclaimed yet by the king, but I don't think he would mind, especially since I did it for my soon-to-be wife,
he said with a smile. Wife, you're moving pretty fast, aren't you? What if you learn that you do not actually like me? I am no longer a child. I'm very combative, strong-willed, and now driven by my own desires, she states with a dignified look.
Then I guess I'm going to have an interesting time getting to know you again,
he says to her, smiling. The ball is not over yet. Let's enjoy the time we have before things get more formal, he says, leading her back to the dance floor. As the evening progressed, they found themselves drawn together on the dance floor. Their movements were synchronized, a dance of seduction hidden beneath the guise of propriety. Each touch sent shivers down Lady Amelia's spine, awakening desires she had never known existed. The ballroom, under the veil of moonlit gardens, they stole moments of intimacy. Their whispered conversations revealed shared dreams and fears, bonding them in a way that defied the rigid social hierarchy of Victorian society. But their lively drama did not escape notice. Whispers of scandal spread like wildfire among the guests, casting shadows over their happiness. Even though she and Lord Byron weren't officially fiancé, Lady Amelia still faced disapproving glances and stern reprimands from family and friends who upheld societal norms above all else. That, however, ended swiftly when the king got involved, blessing the union between her and Lord Arley. Years later, Duchess Arley and Duke Arley are walking with their 2 children through their garden, reflecting on the day they met with a mixture of nostalgia and contentment. I still can't believe that I did that in the middle of a ball. You cousins must have been very upset by the commotion, Amelia says, shaking her head.
My aunt was actually very happy. It made her ball the talk of society for weeks,
Lord Arley says, smiling. Mama, look how pretty. Amelia's daughter said, beaming, showing her a flower she picked. That looks gorgeous, Emmy. Let's pick some more to bring inside your room, Amelia says to her. Lord Arley stares at Amelia. Yes, what is it, my love? She asked. You just get more beautiful each and every day. Amelia smiles and they share a kiss. You save you me from a horrid ogre, of course I would age gracefully. She smiles.